What if the gingerbread house in Hansel and Gretel wasn't just a fairy tale invention, but was actually inspired by real cases of cannibalism that occurred during medieval Europe's worst famine, when starving families resorted to eating human flesh, and children were abandoned in forests to die? We're exploring how the brothers Grimm collected a folk tale that preserved the traumatic memories of the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, when food became so scarce that legal records document families eating human flesh to survive.
Is there any more?
We have to make it last.
Most people think the brothers Grimm wrote cute bedtime stories, but Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm were actually German scholars working in the early 1800s. After Napoleon invaded and occupied German territories, the brothers became obsessed with preserving German culture and language before it disappeared forever. Their goal wasn't to entertain children. It was to document folk traditions for academic study. This meant they didn't censor the violence or disturbing themes that appeared in the original stories. The version of Hansel and Gretel we know came from Dorothea Wilde, a young woman who later married Wilhelm Grimm. She told them a story that had been passed down through generations of German families, preserving memories of real historical events that were too traumatic to discuss directly. The Grimms published their collection in 1812. Only later did publishers start marketing these stories to children, which required heavy editing to remove the most disturbing content. But even in sanitized versions, the core horror remains. The Grimm version of Hansel and Gretel contains details that modern adaptations carefully avoid. In the original tale, it's not an evil stepmother who wants to abandon the children. It's their biological mother who convinces their father that leaving Hansel and Gretel in the forest is their only chance for survival. The story follows a brutal truth. During a famine, parents with 4 mouths to feed and no food face an impossible choice. They can watch all 4 family members starve slowly, or they can abandon the children and hope they either find help or die quickly rather than suffering prolonged starvation. The first abandonment fails because Hansel marks the trail with white pebbles, allowing the children to find their way home. But when the parents try again, Hansel can only use breadcrumbs, which birds eat before the children can follow them back. When the children discover the witch's gingerbread house, they're literally starving to death. They eat parts of the house because they have no choice. The witch doesn't trick them inside. They break in because they're desperate for food. The witch plans to fatten Hansel and eat him, but Gretel pushes her into the oven first. The children steal the witch's treasure and return home to find their mother has died. The story ends with the surviving family becoming wealthy from the witch's gold. The historical context that shaped Hansel and Gretel was the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, one of the worst disasters in medieval European history. A climate crisis combined with unusually heavy rains destroyed crops across the continent. Historical records from this period document food prices increasing by 800% in some regions. People ate bark, grass, and anything else they could find. Contemporary chronicles describe parents selling their children into slavery to give them a chance of survival, and cases where families drew straws to decide which members would be abandoned or killed to preserve food for the others. Most disturbing are the documented cases of cannibalism. The Chronicle of Guillaume de Nangy records instances of people eating human flesh during the famine. Legal documents from the period show courts struggling with how to handle cases where starving people killed and ate others, including their own family members. Child abandonment became so common that churches and legal authorities had to develop specific procedures for dealing with it. Some regions created laws stating that parents who abandoned children during famines would not be prosecuted if the children survived and returned home. The period following the Great Famine saw an explosion of witch hunts throughout German territories. Communities traumatized by mass starvation and social breakdown needed someone to blame for their suffering, and accusations of witchcraft provided a convenient target. German witch hunts were particularly brutal and systematic. Between 1450 and 1750, an estimated 20,000 to 25,000 people were executed for witchcraft in German-speaking regions. Unlike other countries where witch hunts primarily targeted women, German persecutions killed men, women, and children as young as 7 years old. The witch in Hansel and Gretel embodies the cultural fears that drove these persecutions. She lives alone in the forest, practices cannibalism, and accumulates wealth through evil means. Her death by fire mirrors the execution method used for convicted witches, and the children's theft of her treasure reflects the property seizures that followed real witch trials. Later versions of Hansel and Gretel replaced the biological mother with a stepmother. It reflected the reality of medieval family life. High death rates during childbirth meant that stepfamilies were extremely common. Children often grew up with stepmothers who had their own biological children to prioritize, creating real tensions during difficult times. The stepmother trope also served a deeper psychological function. By making the abandonment the stepmother's idea, the story preserved the ideal of maternal love and made it more palatable for children. The connection between the evil stepmother and the cannibalistic witch isn't accidental. Both represent dangerous female figures who threaten children's safety. The story eliminates both threats. The stepmother dies while the children are away, and Gretel kills the witch. Similar stories appear throughout medieval European folklore, suggesting that the themes resonated across different cultures facing similar challenges. The Italian tale Nilo e Nella features children abandoned in woods whose trail markers are eaten by animals. They encounter a figure who plans to eat them but are saved through cleverness and violence. French stories like Fée Seraon include thread trails that disappear and encounters with cannibalistic ogres who must be tricked and killed. Perhaps most disturbing is the French tale Le Petit Poucet, where an ogre plans to eat 7 children, but the protagonist tricks him into killing his own 7 daughters instead. The children then steal the ogre's wealth and return home as heroes. These variants share the same basic structure. Economic desperation leads to child abandonment, failed attempts to return home, encounters with cannibalistic figures, and escape through violence that often involves killing the threat and stealing their wealth. The enduring popularity of Hansel and Gretel reveals something uncomfortable about human nature and survival. The story teaches children that adults, even their own parents, might abandon them when times get tough. It shows that survival sometimes requires violence and theft. It demonstrates that the people who seem most helpful, like the witch with her candy house, might be the most dangerous people in our society. These aren't pleasant lessons, but they may have been necessary ones for children growing up in an era when famine, disease, and social collapse were constant threats. Modern adaptations have sanitized most of these elements, turning Hansel and Gretel into a simple story about stranger danger or the importance of sticking together. Hansel and Gretel isn't literally true, but it preserves medieval truths about hunger, family desperation, fear of outsiders, and the persecution of vulnerable people. The story functioned as cultural memory, storing the anxieties and survival strategies of communities that had lived through genuine horror. Folk tales like this served as psychological preparation for children who might face similar challenges. They provided scripts for understanding why terrible things happened and how smart, determined people might survive them. The transformation of these memories into children's stories reveals how cultures process collective trauma. By turning real horror into fiction, communities could preserve important survival knowledge while making it psychologically manageable for new generations.